Welcome to the Leadership Coaching Group's podcast. I'm your host, Liz Howard, an entrepreneur, author, and executive leadership coach. This is where I introduce you to the top experts that discuss the burning topics that leaders at all levels need to know about. My goal is to help you become a leader that you are confident others will want to follow. So, subscribe to the show, listen in weekly, and watch your confidence as a leader grow. Hi, Becky. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Liz. I really appreciate you having me here.
I am excited to talk to you about one of my favorite topics, which is happiness. But before we dive into that, would you please just tell our listeners in 1 to 2 sentences who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I am a lawyer turned coach, and now I work with people who want to next level their leadership or who want to explore how to live happier, easier, priority-aligned lives. I'm also a mom and a wife and a dog mom.
Oh my gosh. Well, we've got a lot in common. So when I was reading a little bit about you and getting to know your work, one of the things that really caught my eye is you were talking about happiness and, kind of cutting out the things that don't matter and focusing on the things you do. I'm a newish mom. I have a 1-year-old, and it's like the things that matter are the things that matter a lot, and they don't always have to do with work. And I find myself constantly stressed. Can you talk about this?
Can I talk about it? Sure. Yeah, I've lived it, right? So, I am not a newish mom. My oldest is 17 and a junior in high school. So I've been at this mom thing for a while, and I've been at this working mom thing for a while too. And the way that I like to think about it is first starting by recognizing the season that you're in. So you're in a newish mom season, right? Mm-hmm. And that might mean that the things that matter most are not the things that mattered most a year ago. And it might mean that you have to adjust your priorities and adjust your expectations as a result. And I think we often, because we're moving so fast and so focused on where we're going, we often forget to sit and take stock of where we are and what's really going on and what season of our life we're in. So for me, the exploration of happiness sort of starts there, really understanding where you are today and what you've got going on in your life today. And then what your top priority is right now, and then the subsequent list of things that are important. And that helps you kind of align your daily life, your choices, and hopefully allows you to release some of the guilt around what has shifted.
Okay, so we've got a lot to talk about. But
yes, absolutely. There was a lot in there.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, which I love. This is great. So it teed it up really well. So let's kind of start from square one, because this whole topic of happiness feels a little bit esoteric sometimes. So how do you know if you are actually happy?
That's a great question. And I think one of the challenges, right, is that answer is incredibly individual. What it means to be happy is going to be different in some ways at a minimum for every single person. So I'll tell you how I define happiness. For me, happiness means having as much as possible of my energy, time, and resources focused on the things that matter most to me. And then it means being in a position where I can experience and feel all of the feelings, right? So happiness isn't just about smiley faces and rainbows and unicorns, right? It's about a rich experience where I have the tools and ability to manage all of what life throws at me, because I've got a clear understanding of what is most important to me in this season of my life.
So it's one thing for entrepreneurs to say, I'm going to shift to I'll just stick with Michael Hyatt's words, my zone of genius, right? The things that not only I'm good at, but I love doing. If you are in a corporate setting or maybe a law firm or something like that, it might feel a little bit harder to shift into that place. So what do you do if you feel like your role is a little bit defined already and you are feeling a little drudgery?
Well, I think there's a couple things. The first I will say is, so I work with a lot of people, doing one-on-one coaching, and about half of my clients, maybe slightly more than half, are employed in larger organization settings, law firms, corporations, that kind of thing. And what I've been surprised by in general, and it's true even in my own life, I could tell you examples, people lose sight of what actually brings them joy, what actually brings them fun. And so the first thing is reevaluating, where is my joy? Where could my joy come from? And so, yeah, we don't always have the freedom to truly just abandon everything and focus exclusively on our zone of genius. But in reality, we have a lot more freedom than we think once we start to really dig in and talk about what motivates us and what drives us and where our joy comes from. And then finding ways to incorporate more of that into our lives as a whole, right? And that can be in the workplace, it can be outside of the workplace. And each season will bring a different balance of that from different sources.
Can I lovingly push on this a little bit?
You please do, yeah.
So it seems to me that when you are happy, it's easier to find more things that bring you joy. But when you're really kind of in the dumps, it's really hard to find, I'm like thinking of Marie Kondo, it's really hard to find anything that brings you joy. So what do you do if you're just in that kind of low blue kind of place and you're having a really hard time finding joy?
Well, I mean, the first thing is, right, like that low blue place is a real place. So acknowledge its realness, acknowledge its richness, explore it, figure it out, engage with it in a curious way, right? Why am I in this place? What is this place about? How can I name this place? You know, and there might be several names there, several emotions, several things that are going on. What control do I have in this place? And then if it's a bunch of feelings, what are those feelings actually trying to tell me? Because each feeling I think that we have is bringing us a message. And so before we can move through them, past them, around them, I think we need to listen to them. So that's where I would start, is let's be real about the place that you're in. And then it's not always obvious where our joy comes from, right?
Yeah.
And so it is about slowing down and taking the time to really do a thorough analysis of, or I should say analysis and exploration of what makes you joyful. What has made you joyful in the past? Why has it made you joyful? And often when we do this activity on our own, we stop at, well, I really love vacation, right? As an example, like vacations make me happy. Okay, what is it about vacations that makes you happy? Is it being in a different place? Is it having no responsibilities? Is it being away from work? Is it eating out? Is it staying in a hotel and not having to clean up? Like, what is the thing that's driving joy in that experience for you? And then let's find all those building blocks and figure out what we're going to do with them.
Oh, I love that. It's like doing the 5 whys almost for some of the things that you enjoy. So have you seen any trends for kind of what are the big, like, are there any common, I know this is all individual, but are there any kind of common trends that you've seen, like these are big factors of joy for the people that you've spoken to or worked with?
We can trace joy to connection, right? Being connected to our work, being connected to the people that are in our lives, being connected even to our organization. And some people might even describe that connection as belonging. That is a source of joy for many, many people. I think also simply reclaiming control can be a source of joy for a lot of people. You know, you describe the person who's sort of feeling overwhelmed and maybe is a little bit in the dumps, and it feels like, well, geez, I don't even know what to do, right? Like, what do you mean, where's my joy? Like, I feel stuck. I feel frustrated. I feel overwhelmed. I have to keep this job because I have to pay my mortgage and I have all these responsibilities as a parent, and it just all starts to pile on, right? And simply reframing the situation and identifying where you do have control can be a huge shift to a more joyful or happier place, right? Because it's like, oh, there is a way out of this, right? And I might not get out of it immediately. I might not solve it all in a day or a week or even a month, but I now see a path forward where I can incrementally improve things. And so I have hope again. And that's a big deal.
I love that. So here's kind of addressing the elephant in the room. So let's say I feel like I've sort of identified some of the factors that bring me joy or things that I think might lead to happiness, but they're not going to make money, right? And I need some money in my bank account. How do you reconcile that?
Well, I mean, can I push gently there a little bit?
Yes.
I think, to be honest, I think if that's what it comes down to, then you haven't distilled your joy-making factors to their essence, right? I think if you feel stuck because, and that's not to say, again, that this is an easy solution, but if you feel stuck because you say, well, what would really bring me joy is doing this job that nobody will pay for, I think there's a little more exploration to be done there. Around, number one, what is about that job that is joyful? And are there other things you could do that might be more obviously lucrative? Number two, is there a way you could architect a life where you provide financial support for time spent doing that thing in a different way? Mm-hmm. Number three, what is your priority? Right? I mean, that's what it really comes down to. Mm-hmm. Where do you want to focus your time and energy? And then how can you make that happen over time or in time or at this time? And those are all different answers. There's a lot to unpack there. I just don't think that it's about giving up when you see on the surface a mismatch between joy and money.
I totally agree with you, actually. And that's what I get for like pushing on a litigator, because it's good that you push back. I'm glad. But no, I think you're absolutely right. And I'm glad that you said that, because there's so many times that I've talked to people and they're just like, oh, there's no hope. And it's like, well, keep going, for a lot of the things that are businesses now. Who would have thought that being on YouTube would have been one of the most lucrative careers that you could have, like there's always a way.
Yeah, no. And I think, look, you hit on something important there, right? We live in this world where we are told this is how you become successful. This is how you earn money. And eventually, if you earn enough money, you'll be happy, right? Mm-hmm. That is the underlying sort of societal message. In order to break that, you have to be willing to look at two things. One, you have to be willing to look at possibilities outside the edges of what you've previously considered, like that YouTube might turn into a career. And then two, something that I've just been exploring personally is how do we move past the idea that it always has to be a one-for-one value exchange? Mm-hmm. And can we recontextualize abundance in a more holistic perspective, right? Maybe you're able to earn an income stream doing X, but what brings you joy is Y. Is that actually a problem? As long as you're able to spend your time in an appropriate, balanced way for you, I don't think it's a problem. But I think a lot of people don't even get to that point of consideration because they think, well, I need to get paid for doing X because X is what I want to do. Even more than that, it's about finding ways to do the things that you care about. If they are truly what drives you, truly what's important to you, then let's get creative and figure out how to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you do it when you decided to make some of the big shifts that you've made in your career? What was kind of the driving factor for you, and how did you manage the thoughts, the self-talk, whatever it was, to get yourself there?
Look, it's been a process. I'll be really honest. As I said, early in my career, I was a litigator, and I had sort of an aha moment where things kind of came to a head, and I was juggling a 2-year-old and a really intense trial. And, I had a moment where it's like, oh, this is great. I'm killing it. I'm doing it all. And then really quickly in sequence after that, had the thought of, and also this is unsustainable, right? I'm exhausted. I don't even know if I want to do it all. Like, who cares if I'm doing it all? Do I care if I'm doing it all? And that was kind of the beginning of exploring this idea of, in my own life, of what matters to me and how can I incorporate more of that? And so made a shift from litigating to working on the admin side of law firms so that I could retain a little bit more control over my schedule and be a more present parent, because I decided that was my priority. And that involved a pay cut and what felt at the time like a hit to my prestige. I was arguably on partner track as an associate, and that felt like what I was supposed to want, but I didn't know if I wanted it, right? And so really started beginning to push on other people's shoulds. But no, like I said, I didn't make the switch at that point to becoming a coach or running my own business. I only did sort of the thing that was just at the edge of the obvious thing, right? I stayed in law firms. I stayed in law. It was something I could do that was familiar enough. And then it took me another, 13 years before I figured out, no, it's really time to think about what I want to be and how I want to spend my time, and really settle into that and take the risk on the money side to follow what brought me joy and what I think my purpose is.
What's the first conversation that you usually have with people that come to you and they're just like, I can't anymore, like I can't do what I'm doing. I'm not happy. What, help me. What would the first conversation be?
I mean, I think that we have to start by taking stock of where you are. Like, what's really going on? What's really in your life? What's really at the root of your unhappiness? Where is, as you as you described it, this tension coming from? Before we can even dig into resolving it, we have to really get clear on where you are today. And one of the things that to me is part of the magic of the way that I coach, and I think a lot of coaches work this way, is simply getting it out of people's heads and into something tangible that you can see, right? Whether that's a mind map or, I have a couple art-based exercises I've used, or just a wall full of Post-it notes, some way to really begin to catalog in a visual way what's going on. And often that results in one of two things. Either a client realizes there's just a lot of stuff I got to figure out, and so we're going to take it piece by piece, or they realize, oh, in fact, this isn't as much as I thought. There is this one main theme that we need to unwind, unpack, untangle, and solve. And so that's usually where I start the conversation.
And I love that because, and I think you actually pointed to this earlier, but when you can put a name to it, it becomes so less scary. Like, the thing that makes me really burned out is working 65 hours a week, or you're a litigator, working 80 hours a week, whatever it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I think enough people could say there's a point where a lack of sleep would get to any of us. It's not healthy or whatever it may be. And when you actually just name it, that demystifies it and it makes it something you can work on. If it's just this unknown, then I don't know, I think that's a recipe for anxiety.
Well, and I think what happens is the unknown tends to get bigger, right? I mean, just inevitably, like you're like, I'm unhappy. And so I don't know why, but it's huge. I just know it's huge, right? And the more it's there and the more it's unnamed and the more it's unexplored, the bigger it feels, until you can get it outside of you and really look at it and say, oh yeah, you know what? That's not that big.
Yeah. So this is like one of those questions that really can't be answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So how quickly is it possible for someone start to turn the ship around a little bit? So if you have named your thing and you're like, okay, I'm ready to work on this, how quickly do you think it's possible for people to start to observe a little bit more of those flashes of happiness in their life?
I mean, I think it can be pretty immediate for some people. And that is not to say if it's not immediate for you, you're doing it wrong, right? I think it just depends where people are in that process and how assertively they want to go after making change, right? I've done that exercise with some people and they'll look at that list and say, oh my gosh, like this is a problem. And now that I see it in black and white or in pink Post-it note on the wall, I can't do it anymore, and I'm going to fix it right now. And fix it sometimes means I'm starting to look for a new job today, or I'm going to therapy with a partner right away, or whatever it is, right? Like they see this problem and it's so now obvious to them that they can't unsee it, nor can they ignore it. So I've seen people make positive shifts very, very quickly once it becomes obvious what's really going on. But it also takes some people longer, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Because it all depends on how fixable, how easy, how quick you are able to act. And that's different for different situations and different people.
So I'm an optimist, but I'm about to sound like a pessimist. Is there any risk of like slippage, if you will? So if you have kind of gotten to this point of having more joy, having more happiness, do people go backwards? And if so, how do you combat that?
You know the answer, right? Of course, it's not a straight line. And I think you combat it with an awareness, right? And with tools that allow you to be more thoughtful. I mean, one of the things that I'm also passionate about that we haven't talked about is, we're an action-driven society. And you even asked a question ago, like, well, how quickly do people make the change? And I mean, so the way I look at happiness, there's often kind of three gaps that are in our way. One is authenticity, not really knowing what makes us happy or not claiming and being willing to sort of claim and own that and act on it. Then there's physical energy. We're just not spending our capacity on the things that matter to us. The problem is we jump right from figuring out what we want to trying to do it without stopping in what I call the third gap, which is the emotional energy gap, the mindset? Do we have the beliefs and feelings that will support lasting change? And so some of the backsliding can be prevented by doing that work around your emotions, your nervous system, your mindset. And then some of it is just a natural part of the ups and downs and twists and turns of life, right? As a new season comes upon us, do we take the time to evaluate, oh, I'm in a new season, so have my priorities shifted? How have they shifted? How do I want to realign? Or am I just charging ahead on the same path? Well, if you're charging ahead on the same path, you're going to have some slippage and you're going to have to slow down and address it at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the way that you avoid it, is by having a toolbox that you can kind of redeploy over and over again throughout the course of your life as your circumstances change, to make sure that you're, driving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying about kind of doing the thought work around it too. There was someone who mentioned this concept of like 50-50, that life is kind of 50-50. Sometimes it's going to be really good and sometimes just not, and if you just kind of embrace the fact that sometimes it is and sometimes there's the harder times, but it doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean the world's going to stop and you have to get off. It doesn't mean anything like that dramatic. It just means this is one of those times. And I think if you do the thought work ahead of time, it's a lot easier to handle those things, instead of like anytime something a little bit challenging comes about, that it's like personal or super dramatic.
Agree wholeheartedly. For me, like I said, happiness isn't roses and rainbows and unicorns all day long, right? It's about being able to navigate those ups and downs with a little bit more grace and ease, because you're not afraid of the ups and downs. You recognize that ups and downs, like you said, are inherent part of life. And so just having the tools to move through them and not get stuck in them, I think, is the important part.
Yeah, I definitely do too. So, Becky, you are also, on top of everything else, you're an author. My goodness, you've done a lot. Tell me a little bit about the book that you wrote.
So I have a book coming out next, I guess now it'll be next spring, spring of 2021, called The Happiness Recipe, A Powerful Guide to Living What Matters. And it literally is based on a lot of what we've talked about today and those 3 gaps that I described. And it's a very action-focused guide on how to find more happiness in your life by identifying what matters most to you and being able to let go of the rest, do less of the rest, focusing again on sort of closing that authenticity gap, closing the emotional energy gap, and closing the physical energy gaps.
It sounds very needed too, especially like, I think 2020 just kind of came at people pretty hard. The issue of happiness is definitely an issue. So I think that this is incredibly well, I don't know if that was intentional, but I think it was well timed.
Accidental, right? Yeah.
So Becky, if you had just one piece of advice to offer to a brand new leader, what would it be?
It would be this: the best kind of leader you can be is yourself. Truly lean into who you are as a leader, and don't get hung up on trying to be a leader like fill in the blank.
If people want to get in touch with you and learn more about you and your good work, where can they go?
So the best place to find me is on my website. It's grantleycoaching.com.
Awesome. Becky, thank you so much for sharing all this really good information about happiness and joy. It was fun talking to you.
It was great to talk to you too.
All right, guys, that is all for this week. Until next time.
Hey guys, if you're getting anything out of this show, please head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. I read every single one, and honestly, your feedback is single-handedly what keeps this show going. So go to iTunes and let us know you're listening. Thank you so much for being a part of our community.